afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming here. I also would like to thank the organizers and the esteemed panelists, as well as the moderator, for allowing me to share some of the slides that I have over here. So this topic of mainstreaming renewable energy, it was slightly divisive in my mind. I mean, if I think about mainstreaming, it would anything which is mainstream, it should be cheap, it should play an important role in the overall sector, and it should also be reliable. So while India did commission more renewable energy projects in the past couple of years than compared to, let's say, coal, but there still is a lot of things that are still needed to ensure that we have a more cheaper, reliable grid which can take more renewables in the future. And these past 2 years of achievements, as I mentioned, where renewables were renewable installations were more, I think they were not just a fluke, they were not an accident, they are actually something that is here to stay for a very long time. To show that, I would just like to draw your attention to one slide. This is taken from one of our studies that we do on an annual basis, in which we try to forecast what could a future power system look like if the country decided to meet all its power needs, electricity needs in this case, in the most sustainable and economical way. And this is what it looks like. So what happens is renewables can provide ample and economic baseload power generation along with some increase in nuclear and hydro, but with the same level of coal power plants that we have at the moment. So we may actually not need to build any new coal power plants, even if there is so much of renewables coming in. However, it will not happen all by its own. Renewables will not happen by its own. So you see there's a purple or a pinkish line on the top, and there's a gray bar in the second from bottom. So what happens is, in order to support these renewable generation, we also need some flexible capacities in the form of either batteries or other flexible generation capacities. And as you can see on this chart, the whole power sector is expected to flip over its head and go from a fossil fuel dominated to a renewable dominated if we choose to have a power sector which is determined by the most economic case and sustainable case. And by the way, just as a caveat, this analysis does not include investments in transmission. It's mostly on the generation side. Now, the second question comes in, how much renewables do you want? And if you just take this snapshot, so this is from the latest power sector regulations in the EU, where 17 EU member states are targeting more than 40% renewables in their power mix under the current mechanism. So if you can see, the blue bars are the current levels, current targets, till 2020 targets. The red area is 2030 target, and the black dots are the current levels of achievements. This also includes hydro, by the way. So that's why you see Austria trying to get up to 100% by 2030. But if you look at India, where we are right now, so we also have an RPO on a generation basis, and that RPO targets 21% electricity by 2022, financial year 2022. And it goes up from 11.5% in FY17 to 21%. So that's actually quite impressive. So we are lagging, but we are not too different. So there's always this discussion on how we are different from the world, but we are different in our own unique ways, but also similar in many ways. Then what happens if you have a lot of renewable energy into the mix is so first of all, if you have a lot of renewable energy, you need to have investments in grid, in storage, and in flexible generation, as I mentioned above. But if you don't have that, that leads to curtailment. And I'm here to offer a slightly different take on curtailments that could happen in future in the renewable projects. And that is that, so if you look at this chart, so there are two charts, onshore wind, offshore and LCOE, onshore wind and PV for Germany and Mexico. And what we are saying is that even with curtailments, the trajectory of cost declines continues in both these countries, in both these sectors. So this is just an illustrative case, but it is true in most other countries as well. At least on the real basis, the costs continue to decline, And what also true is that wind and solar continue to be cheaper than all the other competing sources of electricity, even with curtailments. So curtailment actually may not be a bug or may not be actually such a bad thing. It could actually be a feature that we need to absorb and probably find out ways to work around it. You know, there are still things to be debated on what do we do with this curtailed power. Do we store it as electricity in storage system? Do we convert it to heat? Do we create hydrogen out of it? What do we do? It's still debatable, but yes, curtailment may not be that bad a thing, and it does not ruin the economics of a project if somebody takes care of it. Uh, the next thing I wanted to share is that currently India's, if you look at how India's renewable energy, or at least PV in this case, compares with other parts of the world, we have the cheapest LCOEs for PV. Same goes for wind. I don't have a chart for wind over here. But what you can see is that the margins, the upper and lower limits of LCOEs are shrinking across the globe. It's not just in India. So it's a global phenomenon. India took a lead, but obviously other countries are following us in this respect. But the other thing I wanted to share over here is that because it is already lowest prices that we have, the distribution utilities might need to think that this is not something that will continue forward always. There might be a time when actually power prices will stabilize. Actually, they should stabilize now, and they might go up as well. Because what has happened in the recent past is, this is my last slide by the way, is that some of the projects that were auctioned were also cancelled. Now there's a different story on what happened after these was re-auctioned, but the point I'm trying to highlight is that these auctions were cancelled because the prices that they were discovered were higher than what the DISCOM were expecting. But my point is that DISCOMs should be ready for that. And as Mr. Batra earlier mentioned, that even despite slight increase in tariffs, renewables still are the preferred source of generation technologies. So with that, I'll end it and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.